guys, so I'm back and I decided I'm not going to be on camera because I don't know, I don't want to. So we're going to continue with chapter 8, The Father. If you watched the last video, my first video on this chapter, it was an introduction into the life of Scott, who has obviously a past, and we flash back to see what really made Scott the way that what drove Scott to be the way that he is now. And that's what this section of the chapter explains. So I'm going to get into it. I'm having a baby, Scott, Natasha said solemnly. Scott's heart jumped up into his throat. He attempts to avoid looking terrified to death. You're what? Scott tries to hold his voice down, realizing his parents are only down the hallway. Natasha swallows forcibly while holding her chest. I'm 1 month pregnant. Okay. What are we going to do exactly? When did you find out? What are we going to do? You mean, what am I going to do? When she saw his reaction, Natasha suddenly realized the depth of her words. I didn't mean it like that, babe. It's just, she pauses. It's just that we both have our futures planned out. I know it doesn't involve a baby, especially a baby out of wedlock. Or color, she mumbles. Scott's eyes widened. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? Are you calling my family racist? Are you picking a fight with me, Scott? Because it sure looks like you're just looking for something to be mad at me about. No need to. I was already prepared to make this decision on my own. And I found out a week ago, asshole. Natasha turns to walk away. Scott gently grabs her arm. Scott softens his tone. Natasha was just like him and often lashed out when hurt or rejected. He realizes it did seem like he was trying to deflect and look for an out. I meant it when I said I loved you, Natasha. It means being there for each other no matter what. I've got you, Nat. I don't give a fuck about anything else. Natasha adored Scott's naivety. Although their societal struggles differed, Scott had an old-school mentality and was a hopeless romantic. Natasha wished she had held on to that side of her youth, but her culture demanded a realist perspective. She could not afford to be any other way. Let's sleep on it. I have a few weeks before terminating is no longer an option. Scott felt uneasy about that word. Terminating. This wasn't a job position. It was a life. Nonetheless, he decided to keep that to himself, which would have started another fight. Okay, babe. Whatever you decide. Scott reaches for Natasha and they embrace each other. Fuck this and fuck him. I'm out of here. Scott storms out of his bedroom with his overly stuffed JanSport on his shoulder. A few nights ago, Scott's father confronted him about having a child, saying that it was not part of the plan and that he would disown him if this were his chosen path. Scott had no idea how he knew this secret, but he felt violated. He didn't have a chance to process the information, yet his dad already knew about it. He immediately called Tony. Tony had a strong head on his shoulders. He had always been Scott's voice of reason, had proven himself trustworthy countless times, and Scott was lucky to have him as a friend. Scott turned back, closing the door, and plopped on his bed, biting his lip, deep in thought. Scott, calm down. Think about it. You leave now, you're not just leaving behind a safe place to lay your head, but cutting yourself off from your legacy. Your family will cut you off. Is it worth it? Is she worth it? Tony lays both hands on Scott's shoulders, forcing Scott to look into his eyes. Even if she is worth it, what's the plan, man? How will you manage living and paying for everything on your own? Think, Scott. What do you mean if she's worth it? Tony, there's a whole baby involved now. I can't walk away from that. Scott threw his face into his pillow. Oh shit, bro. How far along is she? She's about a month. And how'd your dad find out? He must have been outside my bedroom door when we discussed it. Scott planted his face deeper into his pillow. Do you think your dad really means it? That he'll disown you? Tony asked, hoping that Scott would say no. Scott contemplated momentarily. It was challenging to say whether his dad was bluffing or not. Yes, he was a man of his word and always got his way, but disowning his eldest? That was even more difficult to believe. Man, I don't know. It's not like I can't get a career without Dad's name. It'll take more time, but it's not impossible. Plus, Nat will be a kick-ass lawyer. Nothing will stop her. I know it. Tony examined his friend closely. This was a completely different side of Scott. The old Scott's only interest was money and sex. This Scott was more mature. He knew it wasn't puppy love. They've been dating for 2 years now, but it was something else. Natasha brought the best out of him, made him gentle, made him believe he could have it all, be everything. Listen, Scott, I can't tell you what to do, especially in a situation this big, but I can tell you what I would do. I would think about the most important thing, look at the big picture, then go from there. Tony knew this was not what Scott wanted to hear, but considering the circumstances, it was the best advice he could give. That night, Scott decided to stay home. He would reach out to Natasha and tell her he would be there for her no matter what, but he could not leave his family behind. Then Scott would tell his parents he'd stay, but he would not be a deadbeat father. If neither of them could accept that, he would have to deal with the consequences of those choices if it came to it. Natasha and Scott had a study session in their favorite coffee shop the next day. Scott had not yet told Natasha that his father knew about the pregnancy. He wanted to wait until they warmed up a bit. This was the first time they had studied together since they found out they would possibly be parents. So, how are you feeling? Scott asked sincerely. He understood he could never know what it was like to be pregnant. Still, other than his mother carrying his younger siblings, this was the closest he's been to getting the inside details of the daily ins and outs of pregnancy and hormones. I'm fine. I haven't experienced the morning sickness yet, thank God. Natasha paused. Babe, I don't want this to be the topic of our conversation every time we're together. Scott felt offended. Natasha, I'm just trying to show you I'm being supportive. Why you gotta be like that? Jeez. Natasha couldn't help but smile. She unknowingly often put Scott through these tests to know where his head was. I know, baby. I appreciate you. Scott smiles, knowing he passed the test, then moves closer to kiss her and rubs her belly under the table. He could definitely see a future with all of them. Those were the best 5 months of Scott's life. Watching Natasha's stomach grow and seeing her body change. She was even more beautiful than he could imagine. The semester was ending, and Natasha's parents wanted to go on vacation before she got too big. They never discussed how her parents took the news of her pregnancy. Scott did not like to pry. If Natasha wanted to share, she would. but things must not have been so bad if they were going on vacation together. The summer went by, and he got no word from Natasha. No letters, no phone calls, no communication. He and Tony joked that her parents probably kidnapped and enrolled her in a convent. Scott wondered if that was so far-fetched, especially when the last semester arrived and Natasha was still not back. He decided to drive by her house to see if anyone was there. Maybe they were on an extended vacation. Her parents' cars were both there, but Natasha's was not. This proved nothing. He had to know what was happening and where his love was. Against his better judgment and Tony's advice, Scott decided to call Natasha's home. After 3 rings, Scott hung up and then immediately called back. This time, someone picked up after the second ring. Hello? Hi, Mrs. Jimenez. This is Scott. Scott Mahomes. I know who you are. What can I do for you, Scott? Scott begins to shake. He didn't expect anyone to answer. Plus, who doesn't have a caller ID these days? He was sure they would have picked up if they knew it was him, or maybe some part of him hoped they didn't. Firstly, considering the circumstances, I apologize for not introducing myself to you both sooner. There was a brief pause, and then, I'm sorry, what circumstances? Mrs. Jimenez genuinely seemed confused. Scott's heart might have stopped beating for a full minute. Holy shit, she never told them she was pregnant. Scott? Hello? Scott, are you there? He snapped out of it. Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. I have to take this call. I'm so sorry to have bothered you, Miss Jimenez. Scott could not have hit the end button sooner. Well, give yourself a round of applause if you actually sat through that. But how could you not? This is golden. Not to tap myself on the back or anything. um, so I hope you enjoyed that snippet of chapter 8 and that suspense of finding out what happened between Natasha and Scott. So I don't want to reveal much more, but what I can say for that chapter is you will not find out what happened to Natasha in that chapter. That's going to come most likely towards the end of the book. And that might be book 1 or that might be book 2. You gotta come along for the ride, hang out and find out. So in the meantime, what you can do is drop a comment, let me know where you think the story is going, and make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you guys. Enjoy your weekend.